symbol of Canada's past is turned on its head in Montreal. The statue of the country's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, toppled by activists yesterday amid anti-racism protests demanding the defunding of police. Similar events took place across Canada and the U.S., with demonstrators expressing outrage over the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. This is the latest chapter in a recent reckoning on race and racism, and it's playing out on several fronts. It is time, once again, for this Sunday Scrum. Joining me today, freelance columnist Susan Riley. Hi, Susan.
Good morning, John.
Courtney Sky, research fellow at the Elevated Institute. Hi, Courtney.
Good morning, John.
Writer and columnist Vicky Mochama. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, John.
And Globe and Mail columnist John Evanson. Hello, John.
Hello, John.
Tomorrow marks 14 weeks since the death of George Floyd at the hands of police, and we have seen the debate and the push for change play out right across the world. So let's talk about the latest events that are happening in this country this weekend. Courtney, do you want to start us off? What you saw and heard and your reaction to it?
Yeah, seeing the continued advancement of pushing for racial justice is something that I think that I expected. I expected to see communities continue to push this conversation forward in a way that keeps it at the front of people's minds. I'm in a community right now that's engaged in a land defense action. People talk about what's happening in media. I was in my home territory, and OPP helicopters flew laps over our community for half an hour, surveilling people on the ground. So it's not new to me that this conversation is very urgent and it's happening. But I would hope that we continue to see attention paid to what's going on and recognize that it's not just this one instance or this one weekend, but it's part of a longer and broader push for racial justice and equity.
We are getting reaction from a number of Canadian politicians to the most recent events. We'll get to that in the next block. But Vicky, pick us up here in terms of your reaction to what's happening this weekend and what has been happening.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is happening is that a lot of appears to be leading our conversation of this, but I really want to pull it back to happen in the case of Regis Korchinski-Paquet and the SIU report that effectively said that there was a finding of liability in anything that the police had done in attempting to assist the woman that the family has requested to get her to a mental health facility. And we're still seeing that. We are still seeing police show up and unfortunately not being an asset to the people that they're claiming to help. In another neighborhood in Toronto, police showed up to arrest a member of the community, and they required, it looked like, more than 30 police officers to arrest one unarmed man. And I think we're still seeing police that fail to meet the challenge of the moment and fail to serve the communities that they're in. And so I think that remains consistent.
And we saw Korchinski-Paquet being remembered in Halifax this weekend as well, in addition to other protests taking place across this country. John, your take on what we're seeing?
Well, I think we're seeing two things, and in a strange way, although they intersect, they're not completely related. We also had protests from far-right demonstrators across Canada, anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers yesterday. In the United States, there were armed clashes. At least one person was killed. We have seen protests as well in Europe, almost the storming of the legislature in Berlin. So I think we're seeing two things happening at the same time. On the one hand, you are seeing a minority of white Christian citizens in Western countries protesting the fact that they are losing control, they are losing demographic influence, they are becoming minorities in their own countries, and they're lashing back through populist demonstrations and by electing politicians such as Donald Trump or Boris Johnson or Viktor Orban. On the other side of it, you have Black and Indigenous protesters saying, well, all that is going on, ancient wrongs have not been righted, wrongs that go back to Confederation and before, and they are protesting. And sometimes the two are clashing, and sometimes the two are clashing to deadly effect. But they are two very different things that are underway.
Susan, what is underway, do you think?
Well, I think, an awareness, a growing awareness, both of our history and our past, and the treatment of Indigenous people and more recently of other minorities too. It's a rough education. It's a difficult education for a lot of white privileged people such as myself. You can see that in the reaction of some of the politicians that John mentioned. Jason Kenney offering, for example, to take that Sir John A. Macdonald off Montreal's hands. And even Valerie Plante, the mayor of Montreal, condemning the pulling down of that statue, which, by the way, has survived many attacks over the years. It's long been a symbol, a provocative symbol. In fact, I'm kind of surprised it's survived the FLQ. When something like this happens, I feel somewhat torn. On the one hand, like a lot of Canadians, I don't like the idea of a small group sort of arbitrarily editing the urban landscape. On the other hand, I totally get that for Indigenous people in particular, that's a very hurtful and provocative statue. And finally, I guess how I come to peace with it all is that I think it's only a statue. And if it provokes more discussion, more investigation, more kind of soul searching, I guess, then it's probably in the end a good thing.
Courtney, is it just a statue?
Yeah, it's absolutely just a statue. And I think that John A. Macdonald is, an engineer and a creator of genocide, and he enacted and set into place a relationship between Indigenous peoples and Canada that was based in genocide and meant to, eradicate us from the country and from our homelands. And we continue to see that happening today with the imminent threat of Haudenosaunee people being forced from their territory at Six Nations, Montreal as well as Haudenosaunee territory. So I think that these, issues are not ancient. I think they're very evident and they're very contemporary. I mean, I'm sitting in my car right now because of the legacy of this racism and inhumanity. So I think that, it does feel like quite, like as Susan's saying, like it is just a statue, but at the same time, it is representative of a very fraught relationship that needs to change.
And the reference, as we often make here to people who write in, of course, Courtney talking about the fact that she has to drive off reserve to be able to get internet, to be able to talk to us, and the fight goes on for that. But just in about the minute or so we have left, I do want to ask about the meaning of that statue. It was obviously been focused on many times. What does Sir John A. Macdonald, or what does his statue mean to people who are taking to the streets in the way that they are? Vicky?
What it looks like when we continue to honor legacies and symbols of colonialism is that we're unwilling to really look at the lived realities and conditions of Black and Indigenous people here. And I think that our fates are tied, even if our histories are different. And so when you have a statue like someone like John A. Macdonald continuing to take prominence in public spaces, that is communicating that these public spaces are not serving Black and Indigenous communities, and that that the politicians who are defending those, who are all of a sudden scholars of history, are not necessarily willing to look at how their populations, how people inside their own country continue to be misserved by this country. And so I think it is just a statue, but it's also more than just a statue.
Guys, thanks again for another great week. Freelance columnist Susan Riley. Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, John.
Courtney Sky, research fellow at the Yellowhead Institute. Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks, John.
Writer and columnist Vicky Mochama. Thanks, Vicky.
Thanks, John.
And Globe and Mail columnist John Ibbotson. Thank you, sir.
Hi, John.
Well, if you missed any of today's Scrum, our website has you covered. Just go to cbc.ca and click on the magnifying glass there at the top of the page. From there, search Sunday Scrum to find all